welcome everybody to how to calm your ADHD brain. And I have an expert here from the USA, Lynn Shumaker. And Lynn is an ADHD coach and also a life coach. And Lynn is also a trainer at the ADD Coach Academy. So that's a pretty big deal as a trainer. So she knows lots and lots around the ADHD and the unique brain wiring of children and adults with ADHD that they have. So tell me about that. How does the brain, how is it wired differently, Lynn?
So how does the ADHD brain different than the neurotypical brain?
Yes.
So I like to think that the ADHD brain has lots of gifts that perhaps the neurotypical brain doesn't have. So areas that are really strong for an ADHD person is often, and we're all different. So that can confuse people, but we are all unique in our own way as well. So we can't put everybody in the same peg. But ADHD people are often like very excellent problem solvers. They like to figure out how things go together. They're also very creative and oftentimes very resourceful. They're very empathetic. Oftentimes they can have a high energy level, and they have this unique talent to hyper focus on things that are of high interest to them. So oftentimes people will say ADHD is a lack of focus, but Ned Hollowell likes to say that ADHD is a regulation of attention, because when there's a high interest, an ADHD person is unstoppable. So you put an ADHD person on a project that they love, and they can go without eating, sleeping, and even delay going to the bathroom because they're so focused and so passionate about what they're doing.
So how do we get children to, how do we get children to focus like that, on children with ADHD to focus on something and concentrate?
So one of the keys, especially in school, or in other things too, is to find an interest area. So if they have a writing project in school, if you find something that they're passionate about and something that they're interested about, that's the easiest way to get buy-in from them. And then once you ignite that fire, they're going to go with it. So sometimes it's dinosaurs that's a high interest for them. I had a little guy that I coached that loved farming and loved tractors, and he could tell you all about the different tractors. So when you buy into that interest, and you can find that interest by asking them questions, that's a good way to discover that. And also really finding out how they work. One of the things that we're really finding with adults as well is a body double. And that's working with someone else. You don't have to be doing the same thing. You can just be in the same room, or you can be on the phone, or just some sort of connection like that. It can be the same way for kids too. So we might think that it's best for a child to work quietly in their own bedroom, and that may work very well for some children. But for other children, it works better for them to be sitting at the kitchen table in the activity that's going on of the house. Because alone, they're going to find other things that are higher interest to them, or be distracted with the very thoughts in their own mind, where if there's just that presence of somebody else in the room, they can work better. So it's exploring to find out what works best for each person.
And do you use any physical things for them to touch and feel? Does that help with children with ADHD?
It does. And there's a great book out there called Fidget to Focus. And I've explored with different things. One of the things I found is a little tiny carpet square. Like you go to the carpet store and you get little samples, and you just take some duct tape or double-faced tape and you can stick it under their desk or something like that, that they can rub their fingers through, or Velcro on their notebook, something like that. Anything. We find as adults as well that oftentimes we don't realize that we're doing it. I'm a huge note taker. I do that partly because of my memory, because I always want to capture everything. I'm afraid I'm going to forget it. But also, I found that it's the physical act of writing things down makes me focus. And I never really understood why I did that. But you become more aware of that. We're also very aware of the sensitivities to ADHD people as well. And there's sensitivities that perhaps you don't even notice until you start paying attention to it. Like I like to use a particular purple gel pen, and it's the smoothness of the pen going across the paper. I really don't like to use a regular #2 pencil because it feels rough. But you don't really become aware of why you're doing things. You just know that you gravitate. Some people will say, oh, that person's OCD. Really? Oftentimes it's because you find what works for you and you stick with it.
Yeah. So using different textures, and so because very often the worst thing to do is say stay still, just be quiet, stay still. That's probably like
Totally.
the worst ever. Totally. So move, use the body.
Yes. And the reason that is because what happens is when you tell them to stay still, just sit there and be still, it's like the old church thing that we think about, right? All their focus and energy goes into trying to be still, because you're kind of sitting there saying to yourself, just be still, just be still. If you move, you're going to get in trouble. Just be still. And they lose everything else that's coming in.
So how does relaxation support children with ADHD? How does Relax Kids classes or Relax Kids products, relaxation, mindfulness, how does that help?
So I love the Relax Kids program, and I love it for ADD people. And I used it the last year that I was in the classroom before I retired after 35 years of teaching. And that's how I found Relax Kids, is because I had a child in my classroom that was melting down severely. I mean, like refusing to do things, emotionally just breaking down to the point he wouldn't go to lunch or recess. And what kid does that, right? The school answers were not quite the answers that I thought were the right answers. So I knew I used a meditation CD to go to sleep by. And so I started exploring and I found Relax Kids. And there's several things that make Relax Kids so successful. The one thing that I love is that Relax Kids takes high, fast energy and then goes to low, slow energy and back to high, fast energy. And that actually teaches children how to regulate. So one of the things with attention deficit is that self-regulation. So that actually teaches them the self-regulation. It teaches them to be aware of how fast and how slow they're moving in their body. I love to use it when they came in from recess because they were all geared up. And so it was like, yeah, use the fast energy and then come back down to the slow energy. And it just was very calming. And you can just even hear the change in their voices, in their demeanor with doing that. The stretching, I think, is just really good as well. It's awakening to them. It again puts them in movement, puts them in a controlled movement. It teaches them things that they can even do at their seat or moving between activities, those type of things. The positive affirmations are excellent because it tells them that they can do it, and it can be very specific to what they're doing. And then, the meditation part is just very, very calming. It gives them tools. And
But the key is that it wouldn't work as well if they hadn't been through the other steps. If you just tell children, like, be still, lie down, meditate, relax, they can't do it. They have to. It has to work through the body, through the movement, through the stretches. Yeah.
Yes, because you're also tapping into the tactile part. You're using different learning modalities there, which is so key. And one of my prime examples is trying to teach the cursive letter K in the classroom. And I had kids just looking at me just in confusion, and it wasn't going well. And I finally was like, okay, let's just do some relaxed kids. And they loved it. So they always looked forward to that. So we did some finger stretches with their fingers that they were writing with their hands, their arms, their body. We did the breathing, which, don't let me forget, by the way, the breathing part is the pause that we talk about in ADHD coaching. And then we did I said, go find your quiet place on the floor. They did the meditation piece. We slowly walked back to our desk. So we did that type of movement as well. And then we did the positive affirmation, like, I am good at writing cursive Ks. And they came back to their desks, and I'm like, quietly pick up your pencil and let's go. And it was amazing. It was
Wow.
just amazing to see those successes. I used it in testing too. I used it
Yes.
before standardized testing that was required from us and from the students. And I had them be like superheroes, super mathematicians before they took the math part of the test. And we did the same type of thing. And they did affirmations like, I am a super mathematician and I can solve any problem that comes before me. And it really just, it put them in that positive frame of mind. It put them in an uplift point. And then when they got stuck on a problem in the test, I could bring them back to that. So, because when we get really challenged and overwhelm is a big word for ADHD people. They get overwhelmed, they shut down because go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, what happens in the brain at that moment? What is going on?
Our amygdala is the emotional gatekeeper of our brain, and the amygdala shuts down. And when the amygdala shuts down, then it's hard to get things going. And they just feel defeated. And there's too many signals coming in at once. And that's the other thing that the Relaxed Kids does as well, is when all those signals are coming in, it's just like fireworks are firing everywhere, right? And you don't know where to look and where to turn. But the Relaxed Kids really calms that part of the brain down. The positive affirmation puts them back in the place of believing in themselves and their capabilities. And then they're back and off and running again.
And how often would be the best, the optimum time for children with ADD to do relaxation? Would it be something you'd encourage parents to do every day with them, once a week? What would you suggest?
I think it's a great thing before bed. A lot of ADD kids have trouble sleeping. Even adults have trouble shutting their brains down at night. We say we do our best thinking at night. We want to have a notepad or something beside our bed because our brains are still going a mile a minute and we can't shut them down. So the Relaxed Kids gives the brain something else to think about. And that's why I use the CD when I wake up and I can't go back to sleep or I have trouble going to sleep. I can't talk to myself when somebody else is talking to me. So that's why it works so well for kids then. But it's also, I just like it to be interspersed throughout the day too. It can be a calm activity to start their day off. It can also be something that I've advised parents to use when a child's in meltdown form. you're not going to get in. You're not going to make progress. You're not going to be able to talk about the situation. It's not a good time to do that. They have to work through those feelings, and they just have to get themselves calmed back down. When they're out of that state, that's a better time to have that conversation. If they
Right.
have those tools to draw on, if they know, transitions are often a very difficult time for an ADDer because it means stopping something and starting something new. And ADDers don't turn on a dime. So oftentimes we expect an ADD child, this when we say, come on, let's go, we're going out the door, to be ready in a minute. And that's often not possible. And when we realize that's not possible for them, we can build in that wait time, and we can build in that transition, and we can use some of the relaxed kid strategies too.
Right. Yeah. And what would you what about adults who with ADHD? You were talking about, because you work with adults as well, don't you?
I do.
Are there any different techniques that adults could use, or if any parents watching suspect that they may be undiagnosed, that they sort of think, yeah, actually.
And actually, I will tell you, I never suspecting it because my brother was severely ADHD with the capital H, the hyper part, right? And I was the successful girl. I trained other teachers, but I was diagnosed at age 52 of the inattentive. And the inattentive is more quiet. It's more in your head. You can be distracted in different things. You got a lot just happening, right? It can be time management. It can be organizing. It can be those kind of things. Overwhelm is huge for adults. And there's more and more adult women later on in life that didn't realize that ADHD was in their lives until later. They get diagnosed and they can look back and see that history. So I highly encourage the meditation for adults.
I would say, as you're talking, Lynn, I'm thinking maybe that's my problem. It's like I've always just thought I was messy, but I tend to, if I'm writing a book, I'll be writing 5 at the same time, and I will switch from one to another. So yes, maybe just as you're talking, I'm thinking, I recognize these signs.
And here's the key, right? So you know why we jump from one thing to another is because our brain gets bored. And even when we develop techniques as a coach, like I personally help people develop strategies and techniques personal for them, from their strengths and other things that they've done successfully. But we admit, like, okay, this strategy may work the rest of your life, or you may get bored with it. And just acknowledge that. And then we have to sparkle it. So that's why we jump place to place, why you're writing 5 books at a time or reading several books at a time, because our brain has a finite amount of attention time. And when it gets bored, we go to something else. So when we just recognize and accept that and say, we're going to reach that point sooner than a neurotypical, but we do what works for us.
And would you say that there are more people on more ADD brains is it an on the rise thing, or we're not diagnosed, but can you recognize them? Can you think, do you suspect when you see someone you think, oh?
I do, yeah. But I've trained so highly in this. I trained in ADD's basic, in their advanced program, and then their family program under Carolyn McGuire, who, by the way, has written a book, Why Nobody Will Play With Me, because of the social aspect of ADHD. And she actually has coaching strategies in there, so it's excellent. And it very well partners with the Relaxed Kids strategies.
So talk about the social aspect. That's interesting. What's that? How does that look like?
And the social aspect can be things like interrupting, being in someone else's space, um, not being able to sometimes observe the environment. She calls it in her book, she calls it read the room. So being able to so she took her kids into the Hallmark store and just had them stand there at the door, and she said, "What do you notice about this store?" And her daughter, that was probably about 7 at the time, and her son was about 4 or 5, and looked around the room and she said, "Well, there's lots of breakables here." And she said, "I don't see any kids here." She said, "I don't think they like kids." She said, "I think this is the kind of store we better put our hands behind our back and just use our eyes." So, it teaches how to read the room. We're
Mm,
also very sensitive. The emotional regulation is high. Okay. Um, our feelings get hurt easily. We take things very personally. Criticism can be hard to take. Um,
mm,
and but as we learn where that's coming from, that's where the positive affirmations help. That's where the words of the meditations are very powerful to us. Like, I can take the part that's useful from other people's words, but that doesn't mean I'm a broken person. It
mm,
just
mm,
means
mm, mm,
that's an area for me to grow. And when we look at it more as the growth mindset, we don't personalize it as much.
mm.
We oftentimes cry easier, or we get angry faster, or more. Like, I work with clients on
Overwhelmed.
rage,
Mm,
overwhelmed, um,
mm,
and we're helpers. We love to help other people, and
mm,
we'll
mm,
take
mm,
on
mm.
we'll take on everybody else's stuff, which contributes to the overwhelm as
Yeah.
well. And
So,
I didn't want to
so
forget that breathing part of Relax Kids, which ties right into what we call the pause. And so we actually, I didn't grab my pause button, but we actually have like a pause button that we'll wear at our conferences and things, because
ah,
that breathing puts the oxygen in the brain, and it provides that break to step back and calm our brain. As much as we love like going to conferences, or, you know, let's say in the day, parties and things like that, we often find that we also need that quiet time
absolutely.
to ourselves, because we have so much stimulus that we're taking into our brain that we wear down, and we find ourselves becoming more emotional during
Mm,
those times. And because we will drive ourselves with our passion during those times, and we don't take that rest and take care of ourselves, that also contributes to the fact that we need to take that transition and that downtime.
fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. So, any more tips and techniques for parents to use with their children? Um, any excuse me, products that you would recommend? Are there any particular Relaxed Kids products that you recommend for parents with children with ADD?
Most definitely. And I love the idea of the private space, or the place where kids can go and be quiet, or
Yeah,
adults. We all need that little getaway haven, I'm going to say.
yeah, like a
So
den.
yeah, so for kids to create a space where they can go when they start, because part of the Relaxed Kids helps children and adults identify the feelings that they're feeling in their bodies at the time. And when
Mm,
we can start to say, you know, my head's starting to hurt, or my eye is twitching, or my stomach has butterflies in it, those are signs that we often ignore. But the more we can come aware of those and pick those out, and then know what to do with them. And that's where
mm,
the Relaxed Kids comes in, is if we need to take that time away, where is it in our house? If we're not at
mm,
home, Do we need to go sit in our car? Do we need to take a walk outside?
Well, I was going to say, Lynn, I think my dog, Ronnie Barker, who's just behind me, I think he's got ADD, and I take him on I can't say it because he'll jump up, a WALK, and we go on this thing, and when we come back, just wants to sit in the car, and he will sit for 5-6 hours, and he just needs that space. And I go in every half an hour, say, will you come out? Not interested, wants to stay there. And it just makes me think, yeah, he feels safe. He feels safe. Anyway, I won't interrupt you.
Yeah. So, that's key. I love the concentration one.
Yeah.
I don't have it with me right now, but I love the anxiety CD, the believe and achieve.
That's affirmations.
Yes. And of course, the calming ones. And
yeah, that's great for hyperactivity.
I use the books a lot.
Yeah, Aladdin's Magic Carpet.
Pants of Peace. Yeah. Look, see my little markers in there?
Yeah, they look very marked. Pants of Peace. Yeah.
And the Magic Box?
Yeah. So you're saying you haven't got a favorite. You use all of them. Just mix them up.
Because there's little things that talk to different situations, and that's the beauty of it. Is I can pull the things that talk to those situations.
Yeah.
I've used it in part of my presentation at CHAD as well, and I've run classes with adults, and I mix some ADD meditations in with the relaxed kids ones with the adults, and the stretching and just like coming down your nose and your face. And the people walk out of that room just open and ready to learn and feeling so calm and relaxed. And we always start with an affirmation, which is a great way to open the day at a conference that's really, really fast paced.
And is that another, just to finish off with a lovely calming exercise, was that another one where you just, if children are feeling very hyper and then they just do this and then place their hand on their chest? Is that the sort of thing that you do just to bring them down?
Yes, and I also do the one with the hands, coming down from your shoulders. Just that touch and that movement.
Lovely.
It's so calming. Like just as soon as you start to put your fingers over your face, like it's so calming. Even when I just see you do it.
You could just do it yourself. Thank you, Lynn, so much.
And you're not hurting anybody. That's the great thing.
ADHD dog is going off now. But thank you. That was brilliant.
You're welcome.